Please enjoy this ad-free episode as part of our Academic Integrity series sponsored by Pangram Labs, the world's leading AI detection tool. Try it out at pangram.com. That's pangram.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience podcast, and we are on another episode of our Academic Integrities podcast series, sponsored by Pangram Labs. And speaking of which, with me, the co-host who is the most, I have with me Mr. Bradley Emmy. He is the CTO and co-founder of Pangram Labs. Bradley, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm super excited to be here. We've got a great guest today.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I actually wanted to pick your brain real fast. Could you let us know all about Pangram Labs? Maybe people have got, what is Pangram Labs? What do you guys do? Tell us all about Pangram Labs real quick.
Oh, Pangram is the leading provider of AI detection software for schools and educators. We focus a lot on AI transparency rather than it being a punitive tool for AI detection. We really focus on trying to understand what are the things behind AI-generated text that educators can use just to inform their own conversations and have better academic integrity conversations with students, which is why we're doing this.
Awesome. Yes. So go to pangram.com to learn more if you're interested. Pangram.com to learn more. Okay. You know how we work, Bradley. We go right into it. So let me get him in. His name is Dr. Ben Worth, and he's the Vice President of Academic Affairs at Mountain Gateway Community College. Ben, how you doing today?
Thank you for having me on the podcast. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So we dive right in, Ben. And of course, we want to know all about you and about Gateway Community College. So tell us all about what you do and how you do it.
Absolutely. So Mountain Gateway Community College is located in rural southwestern Virginia. We're up in the Allegheny Highlands near the West Virginia border. We serve counties down in the southern Shenandoah Valley. For those of you who know your Virginia geography, that's Allegheny, Botetourt, Rockbridge, and Bath counties. It's very rural. We are a large service area, so we've got students driving up to an hour to get to take classes with us. A lot of times that driving is on rural secondary roads. We're small. There's maybe 80,000 residents across our entire service area. So that's really small when you think of the 120 square miles of geography that we serve. We skew more towards career and technical education. We absolutely have a transfer mission. We're very proud of that. We send students every year on to places like James Madison University, Virginia Tech, Radford University, and so forth. But we also have lots of students going straight into the workforce. And they're going straight into the workforce with short-term programming. So we're training entry-level positions in healthcare, certified medical assistants, certified nurse aides. We've got a very strong commercial driver's license program. Really, in many ways, it's the biggest program here at the college. So we're putting people to work in that. But we also we have 2-year associate degrees. One of our unique degrees is in forestry, forest management technology. We're in a rural area. We have a lot of national forest up here, so that program really makes a lot of sense to us. Welding, nursing, IT, business, number of other programs that we have here at the college.
Fantastic. Thanks for that context, Ben. We appreciate that. So we are asking everyone the same question, so we're going to ask you.
Sure.
How do you define academic integrity?
Well, that is an excellent question. As the Chief Academic Officer, that's really my primary responsibility, is to ensure that we have a quality educational experience for all our students, no matter where those classes are taking place. So one of the areas where academic integrity is really important for me is we're doing a lot with dual enrollment, and the state of Virginia has done a lot to improve transfer from the community colleges onto our senior institutions. We have our higher education coordinating authority some years ago created a general education body of courses that students can complete at the community college level, and it will go on to satisfy requirements at four-year institutions. It is because it's Virginia, we've got a great name for it, the Uniform Certificate of General Studies. And that UCGS is approved by the state. Yeah, we couldn't just call it a Gen Ed certificate. Everybody would know what that means, but we got a good name for it. We are Virginia. We've got, the College of William and Mary. It's been second oldest institution of higher education in the country. So what is really changing some of the feel of higher education, and this is happening nationwide, but it's happening certainly here in the Commonwealth, students are able to complete that UCGS while they're in high school. And my college and the other community colleges here in the state are working closely with our local school systems to ensure that all of their students have access to this UCGS, this Gen Ed certificate, while they are in high school. So what does that mean? It means that it's a reality now that a student can graduate from high school, go to a senior institution in Virginia, and have 30 plus credit hours completed prior to arrival. And more importantly, all those credit hours are satisfying Gen Ed and core requirements. So this has been an issue that's been brought up in a lot of research on community colleges, is that students will transfer and not all of those credits will transfer with them, or if they do transfer, they transfer as elective credit, so that these courses aren't set. That means that the student may not have an additional 3 years, but they're still graduating with 130, 140, 150 credit hours. We want to graduate with 120 or close to that. So when I think about academic integrity, my college is now providing that first year of a college experience to high school students, and we expect to see the same level of quality in those courses, regardless of whether they're taught on my campus here in Clifton Forge, Virginia, or if they're taught in our area high schools. And so that's something I work closely with my faculty to ensure that we have that same level of quality. And there are ways that we do that. One is that we ensure that the same credentialing process is used for all of our faculty. It doesn't matter whether they teach in a high school or they teach on our campus. It's the same set of standards for instruction. So for transfer students, it largely means that we've got a master's degree prepared instructor and at least 18 credit hours of coursework in that discipline and in that course of study. All of my dual enrollment instructors are working closely with the program head here at the college to make sure that the learning outcomes in their classes meet the state expectations for those learning outcomes. So if they're doing a course in American history, they're taking a class in chemistry or biology, they're doing an intro to psychology class, we have a set of learning outcomes that were, and this is I think a good testament to what the work here in Virginia. Those learning outcomes were developed initially by the community colleges, but we sat down with faculty. It was faculty in the community colleges, faculty in senior institutions from the University of Virginia to William & Mary to Radford, to look at what are the learning outcomes in the courses you offer, and we made sure that our classes are mapped to the learning outcomes they have in place. So that was a real partnership. And I can tell you from experience working in other states, that does not always happen, where you can get this faculty from senior institutions, faculty from two-year colleges working together to achieve this common goal of making transfer a better reality for all of our students. So we have this common set of learning outcomes. They're common across the entire state for the community colleges. The four-year institutions have agreed to accept those. And so my job then is to ensure that we really are meeting those learning outcomes. And that's the role of my faculty. So they are our program head in humanities, our program head in science. They're sitting down with the faculty that are teaching in the high schools to ensure that we have the same level of quality, no matter where we are.
That's incredible. That sounds like a great program. And it sounds like also a challenge because there's so many stakeholders, right? It's like you have to make sure that like the 4-year people are happy with, that the credits actually mean something, right? And then also there's the high school stakeholders, that are also like, trying to make sure that like everybody's upholding the same standards, right?
It is. And my college has got a great relationship with the superintendents and the principals in our service area. But, there are moments where we've had to pull a class because either the instructor doesn't have the right credentials to teach a class or they're not teaching to the learning outcomes that we've set as these state standards. And so that broader question about academic integrity, I think one of them is ensuring that when we're running courses, that we have the same expectations for these courses, no matter the age of the student in the class, no matter where that class is being taught.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like sounds great. Like, I mean, I think like, ensuring that the learning objectives are met, like that seems like a very reasonable definition of academic integrity. But I guess like kind of in terms of like execution and like kind of on the ground, when you're talking about like kind of like making sure those learning objectives are being upheld, like across so many different, I guess like let's call them like delivery methods, like kind of like how much do you kind of standardize those assessments versus kind of give instructors individual freedom
Oh, yeah,
to assess how they would like to assess.
yeah, Bradley, that's a great question because and I speak also from my experience as a former English professor. I've started my career in the Kentucky Community College system, taught college writing for many years and literature classes for many years. And absolutely, you don't want to stifle the ingenuity and creativity of faculty. Allowing instructors to be able to bring their personality to a classroom is a great thing. So to give you some like concrete examples from both my experience and here at the college, we have a set of learning outcomes for a college writing class. Students have to learn documentation. They have to be able to communicate effectively in grammar. They have to be able to access electronic resources and so forth. But the content that a student can that the instructor uses to teach that can vary course by course. So we have courses here at my college with one instructor using a textbook that might be slightly different from another instructor. They still have the same expectations and learning outcomes. And also allows us to do things like tailor classes to particular audiences. I used to teach a class for primarily health science students. These are primarily nursing students. And so I made sure that when we were doing documentation skills, it's important that students learn how to do documentation. It doesn't necessarily have to be in one in particular documentation style. We all did American Psychological Association because APA style is used by the most healthcare professions, particularly nurses. The content that I put in the class, we read a really fascinating book about a woman who had had a stroke and describes her experiences going through the healthcare system, working with very good quality healthcare, working with substandard healthcare needs. And that was a great conversation point for students who are planning to become nurses. So I think that's a really good point that there are ways you can still keep some flexibility for the instructor in terms of the kinds of assignments, kinds of reading that are part of the class, but still make sure that you're meeting those learning outcomes that are part of the course.
Yep, exactly. And then what about the assessments? Like kind of like are like how similar are assessments across like a single like particular course?
So again, we have some flexibility there. Some of my science classes, we have a standard set of assessments that every student is taking. That really
Mm.
helps us look at the quality that we're providing in assessment of the science course that's offered in the high school versus the science course that we may have offered here on campus. But we also have different kinds of assignments that are relevant to what students are doing. I've got my college runs a governor's school. It's sort of functions the way a magnet program might in a larger, more urban environment. But I've got students from 4 or 5 local high schools coming onto my campus here in Clifton Forge, doing advanced work in STEM areas, biology, chemistry, calculus. And they have some specialized assignments that they do that are unique to that program. And some special projects they do. They have they put on science fair every year. And so we've got an opportunity for those students to do some different kinds of work than you might see in some of the other classes that are serving general population students.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm kind of curious to ask because like, in our field, right, like, we're evaluating these like large language models and these AI systems that like
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of unpredictabilities about them. And so we have evaluations of these systems that
Yep.
like test them in various facets. But then we also have like meta evaluation too, which is like how do we like evaluate the assessment itself, and things like that, right? And so like, would you be able to speak to a little bit like, because like you mentioned like, transfers are like a huge part of the mission, right? Like how can you like track like how well those students are doing like once they transfer? And does that like help you kind of like guide what you need to do?
Well, we do participate in the National Student Clearinghouse, and so we are able to access some of the data. So that does let us see things like what are the attrition rates or persistence rates of our students after they leave Mountain Gateway, and that is a helpful data point that's available to us. Overall, community college students tend to outperform the students in the who started in a four-year institution. That's an interesting statistic that many people don't know. So that is a good data point. We also do things like use some common rubrics when we're evaluating students for general education assessment. So, for example, we have a scientific reasoning general education learning outcome. We has a number of components to it that students are able to use and understand the scientific method, that they can apply scientific principles and theories. And then we have a rubric that we use that's common, but it may be applied to different kinds of assignments that occur in different courses. But that does give us a benchmark, if you will, for looking at how successful our students are doing in different kinds of settings, and even comparing students in different scientific disciplines, because we have a set of common learning outcomes for scientific reasoning, as an example.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So before we came on, you kind of mentioned that there's kind of this community college-wide initiative, to maintain the standards with the 21st century and technology evolving and everything like that. So would you be able to just tell our audience a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we spent a lot of time talking about artificial intelligence. The Virginia Community College
Naturally.
system has a very active AI work group that's working on really transforming how we do a lot of our teaching and learning here around AI. You and like all your listeners, we're all amazed at what AI can do, and we're really focused on how we can teach students how to use it responsibly. We know that all of our students who leave us will be using artificial intelligence in some capacity on into their professional careers. So we think it's important that they learn how to use it responsibly in their curriculum, but we also need to make sure that they're learning some core ideas. So actually, I've just today started forming a local AI work group that's going to be looking at how we looking broadly at how we want to do instruction around AI and how we're going to infuse it into the curriculum. The work group has got faculty and staff with an IT background, but also with a humanities background, a nursing background. We have an instructional designer who's part of that. And I really like this team that we're assembling, because AI is going to be a lot of people have been thinking of like college writing classes as where AI shows up, but as you all know, it's used a lot of coding, but it's going to be used in every single component of instruction we have here at the college. So I'm really interested in looking at how that's going to transform higher ed. And again, it's about responsible use of it. It's not that we're going to say no AI for our students. It's rather, how can we teach our students to use this tool in a way that's going to help them both learn the core content that they need to understand in order to be successful on into their college careers and then their future careers, but also how can they use this tool to help them improve the kind of learning that they're doing. I've seen some really fascinating work out there with use of AI to, on the scholarship side to help. It was a really interesting product that was allowing researchers to load up 4 or 5 different graduate research journals, and then ask questions about those research journals, and then be able to dig down to where exactly that content appears in those journals, identify other published resources out there to pull in. I think it's going to be, that piece is going to be absolutely amazing.
Oh, that's super cool. I love that you also kind of repeatedly use the word responsible. Because that's kind of why we started Pangram, the company, because we wanted to prevent people from using AI irresponsibly. And we see a lot of people using it for fake reviews and spam and all sorts of malicious things. And so, I think giving students that kind of more ethical side of the education too is super valuable. I guess when you're talking to teachers and professors, instructional designers about responsible AI use, how do you define that, and how do you kind of convey that to your instructional staff?
One component is looking at the overall learning outcomes for the class. What is it that students need to learn and know, and making sure that students are learning those outcomes. So whether it's I'm thinking of let's go back to the example of a college composition class. We've all had some version of that in our college careers. Can students still understand documentation? Can they understand what it means to evaluate sources? Do they understand what it means to write legend, write in standard written English? they need to understand that. But I used to spend a lot of time, and frankly too much time, doing things like, how do you format a works cited page or a bibliography at the end? And honestly, that's not really something that's a skill that now a computer can do for us. It can do all that kind of formatting. And I would much rather have my students spending more time thinking about what's the larger point that you're trying to make in this piece of writing? How have you marshaled the evidence and the sources that you found to better support that point? How can you find other and better sources out there to help support the argument that you're trying to make? And how valid are these sources that you're using? And that's where I think AI can be super powerful. And sure, there are AI hallucinations, and there are people who are, if you just are blindly following the AI, it'll start recommending sources that don't even exist. But if you then are using it in a smarter way, here are these sources that I found. What is the academic consensus about this particular source? And it brings up then some information that you may not have been aware of, helps you better understand the integrity of that particular source, and then can redirect you to other sources you may not have known about. I think that's amazing. I think that's wonderful. That's something we really should be showing and teaching our students.
Yeah, I love that you brought up like formatting citations as like, something that is kind of like fading into I don't want to say like irrelevance, but at least, something that we don't consider like a fundamental skill for writing anymore necessarily. Because like, I mean, I think like, I think AI like not only, is allowing kind of like, students to accomplish the learning objectives in different ways. But I think like maybe like AI is also changing what those learning objectives are in the first place.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, absolutely. To put on my literary hat for a second, you write to a community of interpreters, have a set of expectations for a piece of writing, and formatting is one of those expectations. So if it's a legal brief, there's a set of formats that you have to follow. If you don't follow those, your brief can get kicked out. The same set of expectations are true if you're publishing in an academic journal. How important is it that you have committed to memory all of those rules about which punctuation mark to use after a title in this works cited page? No, that's not so important. What's more important is that you can learn how to use a reference manual, or better yet, can use your AI correctly to see that formatting is done, but also to double check that the AI is working well. I mean, I'm Bradley Elvin. I'm sure you've heard the same anecdote before. Think of your AI as a really hardworking but not terribly bright teaching assistant or work study. And if you treat your AI that way, then I think that's a really thoughtful way of doing it. It'll go through and pull in all these, go out and do all this research for you, gather up all these sources. But you need to make sure that you're giving it really good directions on what to do, and that you're double checking the quality of the work that's coming back.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's amazing. Like, and I mean, I think like in the last just even like year or so, like the AI hallucinates a lot less than it used to. And I think like before also like AI would just like blatantly plagiarize various sources and like, make stuff up in the middle. But now like, the most advanced tools are like very capable of like, actually citing real sources and like bringing real information into the picture. So I guess like, maybe like I would hope that like, maintaining the integrity of your sources when you cite them and like checking them, maintains like continues to be a fundamental skill. But I kind of worry that students, will take this for granted, right? They'll just be like, oh, like, I guess like, the AI hasn't failed me in the past. So like, why would I need to go check the sources anymore? But yeah, maybe that's okay. Like, I mean, I think like when I was in school, like Wikipedia was like the talk of the moment. It's like people were like, oh, Wikipedia is not super accurate. Like anyone can edit it. So you need to go check the primary sources. But like today, people just take like Wikipedia as fact.
Yeah,
and,
and
they don't go check it.
That's a good anecdote, because I can remember when it first came out, and you're right, anyone can go in, anyone still can go in and edit these sources. So you have to kind of go in with some perspective. Gosh, I can remember when the Nathaniel Hawthorne entry for Wikipedia, the Scarlet Letter author, noted in the middle of a paragraph of his biography that he was also a great ninja. And it was obviously some high school kid who had gone in and edited that page. But that was in the infancy days, and now we use Wikipedia back and forth. But I think the other thing is understanding what it is. And it provides certain really good. It's a good starting point to gather some information, but it's just a starting point, and help. It's not. It doesn't have that definitive look over a topic, and there are other sources that one can go to find that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess, this is like obviously very relevant, right? Like, so how can we as instructors, like, know whether or not a student has been, using the AI in a responsible way versus an irresponsible way? And like kind of how are you kind of teaching your instructors
Well,
to figure that out?
yeah, and that's something we're just starting with, and also getting our instructors more comfortable using AI. So I think that you really kind of put your finger on a question that's really been in my mind. How do we, I have faculty that are accustomed to using anti-plagiarism software that will then, find examples of papers that have been submitted by other students, and that kind of software is going to be really outmoded here very quickly because students aren't going to be cheating by um, copying someone else's paper. They're going to be going through and using the AI on that. I think one of the, one comment I've made to some of my faculty is it kind of brings me back to the pre-internet days, and I'm going to date myself a little bit because I can remember when Al Gore created the internet.
Oh, Elvin remembers that.
Yeah, back in the day. Yeah, but I can remember a day prior to being able to anti-plagiarism software databases and so forth. We'd be reading through a student's paper, and all of a sudden there'd be this huge shift in tone and diction, and you knew they were quoting from a peer-reviewed journal that they didn't understand themselves, right? And they just were cutting, and this is before you could cut and paste with your software. They were just typing out something they'd found somewhere else, and so you did not, as an instructor, have time to walk over to a research library and start thumbing through different journals to try to find the actual article they plagiarized from. You just didn't have the resource to do that. Now you can, right? You just simply cut and paste that language into a
I'm sure there's some AI tool that does that
and
automatically.
now
Yeah.
it's an AI tool that does it automatically. But back in the day, you didn't do that. So what you do is you just bring the student in, you talk to them and say, "Hey, tell me about this. What you're talking about right here." And notice excuse me, I noticed this big shift in diction, and explain what you're trying to say here in this one passage. And the student can't explain it because they don't even understand what they've typed in. Um, and then you say, look, I know this isn't your work. And then they break down in tears. And then depending on the circumstances, you handle it differently. I think we're kind of going into an environment more like that, where you really have that candid conversation with the student about what is it you're trying to say. How are you marshaling your resources to say that? In the context of like a college writing class, you work with the student, you help them develop that idea over a period of time. If you're doing like a term paper or a major project for a class, it's the same thing. So expect your students to turn in an outline, to turn in, to gather, an annotated bibliography, so you can see what kind of sources they're using, and frankly, encourage them to use AI on helping create those kinds of things, so they can then make a stronger argument for the point they're trying to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like the point about like, knowing your students is very real. It's like, all of our instructors have context about, what is expected, what does the student level of writing look like for this particular class? Like, does this writing look like something that, a student in my class would be capable of writing? And so there's so much context available that I think like, knowing your students and knowing your students' writing goes so far. It's interesting that we bring up outlines because I feel like this is a big like topic of contention among writing teachers because some writing teachers are like, yeah, go ahead, have the AI, make the outline for you. That's totally fine. But other instructors are like, like actually like organizing your ideas like into a structure that you can then write about. That actually is a fundamental skill that we don't want our students bypassing with AI. So, I guess like where do you kind of fall on this spectrum and like or would you say it's kind of up to the individual instructor and their class?
It is up to the individual instructor, but I think this is something that's evolving also. How do we teach critical thinking skills? And they're going to try to broaden it past just college, the college writing class. And there is, I think, absolutely a place where you can use the AIs that are out there to evaluate the content that you've created to give you additional ideas for how that content can be improved. And you wouldn't want it just to create the outline, but maybe start being able to think through that entire process. What is it? What is the larger point you're trying to make? What are some of the founding principles there? And then how can you organize your thinking to support that argument?
Yeah, definitely. And like I think like, assessment just needs to evolve to evaluate that kind of process and like evaluate making sure that students actually engage some critical thinking like at all steps of the writing process, not just the final output. Like, okay, did I use some critical thinking when I was brainstorming? Did I use critical thinking when I was writing the outline or like, writing the initial first draft? Because I think like, as the AIs get better too, like the AIs will be able to also like kind of like fake every step of the process as well. And so just like I'm a little bit bothered by like this class of like writing instructors that's like, oh yeah, well, okay, AI is fine for brainstorming, but it's not fine for writing the final draft. I feel like that's just too broad of a brush. When we're thinking about like assessing like the actual critical thinking was applied.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot, and this was what my local work group that's going to be tied to a state level group on AI instruction. There's a lot of work that's going to need to happen with training faculty, and it's both the younger faculty, but also the people who've been teaching for years. How do we use these tools wisely, and how do we train faculty to use them? And I don't claim to have all those answers. I don't think, frankly, anyone does have all those answers. That's going to be a big challenge in higher education, and a big challenge in particularly teaching critical thinking skills, which I think is a fascinating question. Honestly, I think it's a fascinating question to ask. What is critical thinking? I'm not sure we are always on the same page when we use a term like that, throw it around. Um, and getting faculty together to talk more about how we are going to use tools like AI to do instruction is really what's going to be at the heart of what I see happening here at my college and across Virginia.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, these things get very philosophical very quickly, but I think you can kind of bring them back to earth by like, just asking people like, oh, like, what does a working professional in your field do? How do they use AI? We need to be teaching students how to use AI in those same ways because, ultimately, especially in this kind of community college setting, like the goal is really very much career readiness. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yep.
I mean, I think you can just look at the careers and be like, how are people actually in the careers using AI? And, maybe let that kind of trickle down and guide, how we want students to teach
Well,
AI to students.
and I think on the business and industry side, they're also still figuring out how to use AI. I was at a really interesting conference at Washington and Lee University. It was an entrepreneurship conference, and had some individuals from the tech industry present talking about how AI is revolutionizing what they're doing, and it was really eye opening. And it's everything from the hiring process to bookkeeping, the coding that's taking place in these industries. And it's not that all the coding jobs are going to go away, but that the office that once used to have a dozen people doing coding may have far fewer number doing that. But those people who are doing it need to understand they need to know how to code, but they also need to be able to use AI to help them with their work. And as someone who's dabbled in coding, the idea of having an AI that could go in there and put in that semicolon where I'd left it out is, I think, I am very excited about that because it's so easy to make one tiny little mistake and then none of your code is working.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, I think like, this is not new in the coding field in either. Like, people used to write like instructions on bare metal C in assembly and, then people built technology that, made it so that people don't actually have to learn those like low level languages anymore. And, instead we can write programs that program the lower level stuff. And now it's just like, okay, well, it's like, prompting the AI, like this is just the new form of programming. Like it's telling the AI what we want to program and what are the tests that it needs to pass and like and validate. And so like, my previous mentor just calls this like, software 3.0. Like no longer are we programming the machine, we're programming the machine that programs the machine. And so, yeah, I mean, I think so many things are going to be like this, where it's just like the skill is not going to be, doing the thing that the AI is automating, but it's like, how do I get the most out of this machine? And how do I learn how to program it in intelligent ways?
We're coming up on time. This is a great conversation. So, Ben, Bradley, any other questions?
No, go for it, Alvin.
Okay, awesome. So, Ben, thanks again for your time. Really interesting insights. Last question, Ben. How do you define what do you see as the future of academic integrity? Sorry.
Future of academic integrity. Well, we've talked about the technology side. We've talked about particularly artificial intelligence. That's going to continue to be part of that. Um, I'm gonna do a little bit of a plug for what's happening in community colleges, and I'll mention also my college's work with the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement (NCII). We're part of a Rural Guided Pathways project. That program is really looking at how we can reinvent what community colleges do. Some of the things we're doing at my college is making education more accessible to students. So I'm looking at doing more shorter semesters as opposed to the traditional 15-week semester, doing more 8-week, 7-week terms so I can move students through more quickly, have more entry points to higher education. And academic integrity comes in because we still have the same expectations for learning outcomes. But do we need to have students taking 5 or 6 classes in a long 15-week semester where students might be better served focusing on a smaller number of classes? Looking for ways of doing credit for prior learning. That's another aspect of academic integrity. So that if students come to us and they have real meaningful life skills, they're exiting the military, they've had experiences in business and industry, and they're bringing that with them, can we grant them credit for college experiences so that they can more quickly go through college, get that credential, and move on? I think we can, but there's an academic integrity component to that, making sure that they really did meet those learning outcomes that we're granting a credit for prior learning for. We've got lots of students coming to us out of my workforce programs here at Mountain Gateway Community College. We do a lot of short-term, non-credit training. So get your commercial driver's license, go to work, become a nurse aide, go straight to work. But can we take some of those experiences and then grant credit for prior learning? So if somebody has experience, say, has their CDL, but then wants to run a trucking business and start a trucking company, we can then parlay some of the experiences that they've had so they can more quickly get those skills that they need, business skills, other kinds of personal relationship skills, so they can go out and do that kind of work. So when I think about where we're going in the future of academic integrity, it's also going to be about credit for prior learning and ways of supporting students who are balancing work and family. Community colleges do that a lot. It's kind of in our lifeblood.
Yeah, Bradley, I think Ben is the first one to ever mention that, right? I mean, we've asked a bunch of people about the future of academic integrity, and I think you're the first one. And I love that. I never really thought about that. But
very grounded. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. So I appreciate that insight. Thanks, Ben. That's fantastic. All right. So we're going to wrap it up here. First, I'm going to outro my co-host, who is the most. He is Bradley Emmy, and he is the CTO and co-founder at Pangram Labs. Thank you, as always, Bradley.
Great to be here, Alvin.
Absolutely. Great conversation. And let's outro our guest today. He's your guest. He is Dr. Ben Worth, and he's the Vice President of Academic Affairs at Mountain Gateway Community College. Ben, thank you so much for being here today.
And Bradley, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.
Thank you for listening. This episode is part of our Academic Integrity series sponsored by Pangram Labs, the world's leading AI detection technology. Try it out at pangram.com. That's PANGRAM.com.